What's cracking, everybody? You're back with Mr. Berger, and tonight we're going to be taking a look at a self-crafted Double Witch Giant Skeleton clone deck. And in fact, I actually got about 12,500 views on Reddit with a quick little clip that I recorded using this deck in some previous replays. Let's check that out really quickly. Alright, so we can see here that I actually used the clone right there to dodge the Giant Skeleton bomb, and then I proceed here to just absolutely wreck his tower and get the 3-crown victory. So that's just a quick glimpse into the potential of this deck here. Now, I know it's been a little bit. I've been pretty busy with my summer job. It's something different that I do than rather compared to what I do during the school year, which, as you guys probably remember, is substitute teaching. But I want to go ahead and get back into my videos, so hopefully I can continue to do that. Alright guys, that being said, let's go ahead and jump on into tonight's video. Okay everybody, so as I mentioned earlier, this is a self-crafted deck. I often get decks from what, as I mentioned before in previous videos, Royale API, Stats Royale, Deck Shop, YouTube videos like Clash with Ash, TV Royale, all kinds of different places. And then I play these decks and I kind of showcase them and explain them and try them out and figure out the strategies and take notes from other YouTubers or other sources, other guides and strategies and personal experience and so on and so forth, and then kind of break down those decks for you. But tonight, as I like to do from time to time, I'm going to be showcasing a self-crafted deck, and this is one that I completely made up on my own. I'm sure somebody has come up with a similar concept for the exact same deck before me, but I didn't find it from anywhere like I do with other decks that I generally showcase. So, first of all, you got the clone and you got the Giant Skeleton there. I really like the Giant Skeleton and clone synergy. The interaction that it has is just super devastating. If you can get a Giant Skeleton to a tower, you're just guaranteed to take out like at least half of the tower's health, even if the Giant Skeleton doesn't get a single auto attack off, because the death damage from the bomb is just so massive. So when clone was first introduced, that was like one of the first units that people were like, oh, clone Giant Skeleton, that would be awesome, because the clone drops a bomb too. And even though it's lower level, it still has that massive damage, so even a low level bomb does an insane amount of damage. So a clone Giant Skeleton basically means a dead tower if you can guarantee that that Giant Skeleton is within the tower's range, so that when he drops his bomb, inevitably then it's going to blow up next to the tower. And you know what, as I'm saying that, there's a perfect example going on that like that right here in the background. The Giant Skeleton himself doesn't even need to die. He pretty much takes out the tower himself with the clone's death damage. It only had 33 HP left when that bomb exploded and finished the job there. So they naturally go really well together. So I like to craft a lot of decks around this synergy. And so what I wanted to do was make a deck with the Giant Skeleton as my main tank, kind of, and then include that clone, of course, and build around that. Now the Witch was really strong too. Night Witch naturally goes with the clone spell, so let's talk about that as well. And on top of all of that, the clone was buffed not too long ago. It got a radius increase, so it now affects units in a larger radius, so it's a lot easier to hit the tank that's on the tower, like the Giant Skeleton, and all the support behind him, like your Witch, and get it all in the same clone, giving you so much more value with that clone spell. So the clone was buffed. Now the Witch was also buffed. She synergizes really well with the clone now, even more so because of the way that they changed her. She spawns skeletons a lot quicker now, so it allows that cloned Witch to spawn even more skeletons. And units that naturally die really quickly are, have the potential to have a lot of value with the clone spell, because the downside of a cloned unit is that it dies in like one hit to basically anything. So a cloned P.E.K.K.A. is practically useless, because it'll just die to anything. They can zap it and it'll die. But a cloned skeleton army all of a sudden turns, 16 skeletons into 32, right? So having that Witch that spawns all those skeletons, the clone spell affects the already spawned skeletons, and it also creates a new Witch which spawns her own individual cloned skeletons as well. Now that is one of the reasons that she's really great in this deck, and she goes really well as like a major support unit behind that Giant Skeleton. keep in mind, she has cleave, AoE damage, she's a ranged unit, she can attack air. They reduced her attack speed, she used to attack really quickly, but she's still a really solid support card. And on top of that, you got that huge synergy with all the skeletons that she spawns. The Night Witch, of course, goes really well with Clone. She kind of plays that mini-tank, high DPS role, but the reason that she goes really well with this Clone spell is because she spawns bats. Those bats get cloned. When you clone her, the cloned Night Witch also spawns her own bats. And on top of all of that, she's got a death rattle, a death damage effect. Not death damage, but a death effect that when she dies, she spawns 2 bats as well. So the clone version of her also spawns 2 clone bats. And just like with the skeletons, those bats are really low HP units, so there are things that work really well and get you a lot of value out of that clone spell, because they're going to die really quickly anyway, so the clone versions of them aren't going to lose any value because of the fact that you're turning a very high HP unit into a very low HP clone. You're turning a low HP unit into an equally low HP clone. Now, I love this match. It was a great starting match for this video. Nice and long, kind of gave you an idea of how to build up the massive push with this deck and kind of win with a big counter push at the end there. Now next we're going to talk about the Lumberjack. Now the Lumberjack, of course, goes really well with the clone spell too. He doesn't really have super high HP. Oh, I love that hog emote. But he's a little bit tanky, but not so much. But the reason that he works really well with the clone effect is that when he dies, he drops that rage effect. So if you clone him and the clone version, they zap it and it instantly dies, you get a free rage and your original Lumberjack is still alive. And occasionally, they'll not be able to destroy that clone's Lumberjack, and even the clone version of him does an insane amount of DPS. So if you can get it to connect to a tower with like a Giant Skeleton or a Night Witch in front tanking for it, or even the uncloned version of the Lumberjack, then the clone version of the Lumberjack can do an insane amount of damage to the tower. Now, of course, the major thing is that rage on death effect. You can get that rage, which synergizes really well with your Witch and your Night Witch and just about everything else, all the other units in the deck. Now, the Giant Skeleton, let's talk about him a little bit. I know I mentioned him earlier, but I just want to go through kind of the main reason, or some more of the major reasons that he's in this deck. Of course, I explained the main reason at the beginning of the video. He is a huge defensive unit with his bomb and his high hit points. So he can tank a lot of stuff, buy a lot of time. And when he dies, he absolutely destroys just about anything. You can put him on a golem, and then all the support will kill him. And then as they pass by, his death damage, from his bomb will absolutely obliterate, the wizard and the witch and the musketeer or whatever is behind that golem, right? He provides a massive offensive threat because if you use him on defense and then he goes on offense, they absolutely have to answer him. He is pretty easy to answer, but if he has the support of like a witch or something behind him, he's a little bit more difficult, right? You don't want to allow him to get to your tower, by any means. At all costs, you want to stop him from getting to your tower, because your opponent knows if they allow him to get to the tower. I guess I switched who I was talking about there. Your opponent doesn't want your Giant Skeleton to get to their tower, because if he does, right, then that death damage from that bomb is guaranteed, and he'll just do an insane amount of damage to the tower, guaranteed. So he provides huge threat, so they absolutely have to answer him, and they have to invest elixir to answer him. That being said, you can use him aggressively at the bridge, so you can make it so that they have to answer something. It clogs up a lane. You can use him defensively. You can even use him in the back for a big snowball push, so he's very versatile. I really like him. And remember, guys, you can clone him and get that guaranteed death damage from the cloned bomb, so you can use that to your advantage on defense too. You can do a double bomb, using the clone spell on defense, not only on offense. So definitely a huge powerhouse, a huge staple in this deck. And look at him finishing me off, or rather me finishing him off with the stabby emotes and the hammer emote there. I love all those new emotes, they're pretty great. Okay guys, so let's talk about the clone spell itself. You want to try to catch them off guard with the clone, because once they know that you have it, they're going to be ready for it. It's a very high risk, high reward spell, very similar to the freeze or the heal spells, right? And it has the potential for these massive, insane pushes, as we saw in that kind of intro there, and some of the other replays here. But you want to kind of save it to catch them off guard. because it provides this insane value. Like, you can do so much damage with it. It's unreal, but it's also really easy to counter. And if they know that you have it, they're going to be ready for it, and they're going to have their counter in hand, and they're going to wait for it, or they're not going to allow you to build up a big enough push. Ideally, is what they would want to do. So try to catch them off guard. Save it until late game if you have to. You know what I mean? Don't just waste it willy-nilly. For the first usage of it, try to make it count. Just like you would with a freeze. You don't want to just freeze for no reason. You want to make that first freeze count when your hog or whatever is in there, and then they're like, oh crud, I don't have anything now, and the hog is just destroying my tower because everything is frozen, right? So same thing here. They won't have anything to counter because that giant skeleton got to the tower, you cloned it, and all of a sudden their tower is dead from the 2 bombs. And look at that giant skeleton bomb value there. I think I put that one on Reddit as well, but it didn't do as well as the intro there. Alright, so what else do I want to talk about with the clone here? Yeah, it has the potential for massive pushes. Oh, let's talk about a couple other things in this deck. The minions, they were kind of like a filler, but they worked out well. They're mid to low cost elixir. There's 3 of them, so they synergize with the clone because it becomes 6 of them, and they don't have too high HP, and because of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, that synergizes pretty well with the clone. They're not as susceptible to zap as like bats or goblins or goblin gang or something like that would be. So, if you wanted to do a cheaper cycle card, you could, but just keep in mind that then if you put bats or something there, that would be basically the only card that would be susceptible to zap. So the minions or archers or something are a really solid support card for reasons like that. So I really like minions, so I went ahead and slapped them in there. It worked out pretty well. Alright guys, really quickly, opening moves. I generally open with like a witch in the back. I could night witch in the back. They're both like slow moving units, and you want them to build up, their bats or their skeletons, so that by the time they get to the bridge, you've got like 6 or 9 skeletons or something like that, or like 4 bats or something like that, and then you have the potential to clone all of them too. You can also then giant skeleton at the bridge in front of them, like I just did right there, and that gives you the potential to build up this massive push. You could possibly lumberjack or giant skeleton in the back, but that's kind of a last resort. I wouldn't lumberjack generally. Oh, look at this huge push here. There we go with the clone. I wouldn't lumberjack generally because he's really speedy. Maybe giant skeleton, but you usually want to save him for like defense or an aggressive push. You could always hang tight and play defense if you wanted to. Alright guys, I wanted to go through card replacements, but there's really not too much that you could replace here because this whole deck is built all around the clone. So maybe replace like the minions with another swarm card or archers or something like that, but everything else synergizes really well with the clones, so I want to keep pretty much everything in there. If I could change 1 or 2 things, I would probably switch out the fireball for a poison, and maybe even the log for a zap. I just kind of wanted to switch it up and try something a little bit fresh with this deck. I've had a lot of fun with this deck. I tried so many runs with it, and I did really well. One of definitely the better decks that I've done in a while. So I hope that you guys give it a shot and try it out and have a good time with it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a good night.